speaking. It was always a toss-up between Trichy or Madurai. And in those days, Madurai, used to have a direct flight from Bombay. So I could take the morning flight, come back in the evening, right? But in Trichy, you had to go to Chennai and then take an overnight train, so which meant 2 nights away from my baby at that time. My younger one was a baby. She was about a year old. So I had this argument with my boss at that time to talk about why can't we just do the research in Madurai? Why Trichy? There is really no significant difference between the two. At that's when I was like sort of in this mindset, and then I was driving down. Um, this was in 2001, right? And at the signal, you used to come down from Mahalakshmi station, and then you took that right towards what is now Phoenix. Those days, Phoenix was not that big, right? And there were slums on both sides, if you remember.
Yes.
Right, before all this thing happened. So I was at the signal. It was around 6:30 in May, right? It was actually a hot, humid May evening. Um, and 6:30 in the evening at that signal, there's a lot of traffic already. I was there at the signal, generally mulling over my thing, and then I happened to turn to my left, and I saw this awful incident of a little girl who was sleeping on the pavement over there. I still remember that incident so clearly in my head, and it still bothers me. It still sort of evokes the same response even today when I sort of think about it. There's this little girl, on the sleeping next to the signal on the road. She was wearing a dress, and I clearly remember new shoes on her feet. Someone must have thrown it away or given it, right? She was lying there and fast asleep, very little, maybe 2.5, 3 years old. And there was this man standing at the signal, and masturbating in the middle, like literally. This is Bombay at peak hour traffic. She was blissfully asleep, but it just bothered me. You know how, as a mother, as a parent, it just bothered me as a parent, and I kept actually thinking about my own child and their safety very selfishly. I don't think I thought as much about that little girl saying that, oh my God, if something like this happened to my kids, what would I do? I'd probably take that man to the cops immediately, make sure that there was legal action. And this thing was playing in my mind. It kept me awake for several nights. I had no clue what to do about it. Didn't do anything much about it. But when it started bothering me a little too much, we used to celebrate our birthdays by going and cutting a cake at some organization or an orphanage when I was in my corporate life as well. And I knew of this organization called Akanksha, where we used to volunteer. So I wrote to the CEO of Akanksha, and she's a force into herself and one of my biggest role models, I would say.
Shaheen Mistry?
That's right, yeah. So she's a dear friend now. And Shaheen being Shaheen, within a week, I had quit my advertising job and I had joined her. So that's really how the shift happened, Deepa. It wasn't a thought-through shift, but it was just, something that spoke, I guess, an incident that sort of said that I need to be part of the solution.
Beautiful. And how long were you with Akanksha?
I was there for 6 years.
So what did that experience teach you, and how was it preparing you for what you would do with Antarang, Priya?
Akanksha was life-changing for me, I have to say. Because when I got in, the children were young. We needed both incomes, quite honestly. I don't think we could, I didn't think we could afford to have not had both incomes. So it was a thought through, in the sense, once I decided to shift, my husband and I spoke about it, and he said, try it for a year. Since you're feeling so strongly about it, try it for a year. You can always come back to advertising if we really can't manage, right? So it did mean that we needed to cut back on a lot of travel, holidays, eating out. Those were kind of the things that we needed to cut down on. The one thing that I realized was that as long as we had food on the table, good childcare, that was necessary for me, right? And be able to pay for good education and healthcare. actually our needs are really just that, right? So we had decided that, and that's how I joined Akanksha. Um, Really, I think Akanksha, the way in which it changed my perception, this most significant way it changed me, was just to understand the power of yourself as one person to be able to bring about change.
Wow, that's beautiful.
Akanksha really, really highlighted that each one of us has a well of ability to change things that don't work in the world, and we never realize it, right? I think my work at Akanksha really, really did that. My students from 2001 are some of my closest friends today. They are my sources of inspiration, support. Every time I want to brainstorm, I still go back to them. They're all adults doing well in their careers now. So it's a pleasure to sort of stay connected there. And that reminds you of the potential you have to make that change.
Yeah. So after Akansha, where did your journey take you?
So again, I think my life, since you asked me, and when I do think back, it's just a whole, I would say, string of circumstances that took me from one place to other. Honestly speaking, not much planning there. So I had a health crisis when I was at Akanksha,
Oh,
a fairly sort of serious health crisis, and I took a break. I decided to take a break. For a year, I decided I'll just focus on myself and my family. Working in the development sector um, is 24/7, right? You don't have holidays. It's taxing emotionally as well as intellectually, because your heart and your mind are constantly at war, because
mhm.
certain things are difficult to do and going to be huge challenges, but your heart says that it needs to get done, right? And there's a sense of urgency there that keeps pushing you very often. So I think that did, and my heart also told me that as a mother, probably should be spending more time at home. My kids at that time were 6 and 11. They were not very old, so they needed my time. But often I would like constantly be juggling these impossible timelines and schedules. So I decided to take a break when I had that health crisis. During that time, I met Dr. Armida Fernandez, who had retired as the Dean of Sion Hospital.
Ah,
And she had set up this organization called SNEHA, because for her, seeing as a doctor, as a neonatologist, seeing so many newborn babies die and so many mothers pass away during childbirth, even at a time when science and medicine had made so many advances, was unacceptable. So after she retired, she had set up SNEHA.
okay.
And I met her completely by chance socially through a common friend, and she said, I'm a doctor. I know how to save lives. I know how to heal. I don't know how to set up processes in an organization. And that was really what I was trained for, and I enjoyed doing. I'm basically an operations person. I enjoyed setting and making sure that everything was streamlined, organized, set through processes. So she said, "Why don't you come for a few months, spend a few months with us, and set up those processes?" So I joined SNEHA as their director of operations. Again, I guess that's, it's not circumstance now that I'm talking to you. It's actually people who've changed my life course and life direction.
So,
So I ended up staying in Sneha, then in public health.
wow. And that was again, so you were then exposed first to education, then there was the whole operationalizing part of healthcare and public health. And then how did, what was that moment when you were doing your own Antarang?
So again, when you're a teacher and when you work with young adults through Akanksha, those kids continue to stay with me, right? They would continue to call me. At Sneha, I learned the power of working with the government systems,
Mm.
right, and the power of making change through the system and the scale that it can achieve. One of the big things that you learn when you're working in public health, that if you do want to bring about true change in the country, considering the huge numbers that we have, right? Anything that doesn't shift the system, nudge the system to change. We spoke briefly about what you're doing with elder care, Deepa. That's also systemic change, right? You're nudging a system and the way people look at it and mindsets to change. If we are not able to do that, we're doing something more for our pleasure, which is also a great thing, and our own satisfaction, but not necessarily to change the status quo, right? My work with public health really taught me that. So on the one hand, these kids would say, okay, I've completed my 10th, I'm in graduation, I'm the first in my family to enter college. My mother, who's a housemaid and a single woman, is putting in every penny that she has into my college education, because as a country we believe पढ़ाई करोगे तो life बदल जाएगा, right?
Correct.
And then on the other hand, I was able to see the ability of systems to bring about that change if you make those little changes. Essentially, what sort of the big light bulb moment happened when one of my two of my students came. They used to come to meet me on Sundays, and I'd sort of help them. And you're from SBJ, and so you understand, like, the networks that you form are networks for life, right? So on Sundays they come and say, I'm finished my degree, I'm going to finish my BCom, and I'm leading this crazy life of going to college in the morning, then going to work at Cafe Coffee Day. I'm there as a barista. I'm working there till midnight. But my friend who's a 10th standard dropout is also doing the same thing. We both seem to have the same career trajectory. What's the point in me doing my graduation? मुझे क्यों इतना पढ़ाई करना है, right? So, and that's when I realized that there's no system in place to guide our children after school. Yeah. Who's there to tell them there's a world of possibility out there? Who's there? What is the system that's there in place that, puts people onto a career trajectory and nudges them to keep following a path? And incremental change, right? Even if we say that, okay, I managed to get my driver's son a job as a driver, what we end up doing is perpetuating that cycle of poverty, but we're not letting them orbit out. Yeah. Right? It needs a certain momentum to orbit out. Correct. And that momentum was not being given by anybody. So that's the gap that became very clear to me. So, and therefore Antarang happened.
So now it's 8 years, Antarang?
Yes, it's 8 years.
So why Antarang? How did that name come to you?
So Antarang means inner journeys, right? We all know that any shift that any of us make is actually internal. It's in our hearts and in our minds. Once we make that shift, then suddenly the world itself looks very different. So that really resonated deeply with me, that, how can we partner young people in making this inner journey and this inner shift? And that's why.
And your logo?
The logo is again made by a very dear friend of mine, an incredibly talented artist. So it represents your inner self. The circle is your inner self rising out of your circumstance. Ultimately, it's you that you can lead, who can lead yourself out of whatever circumstance that you can be in, forge new paths.
So powerful. And how did you go about getting your team, which you often talk about in so many fora? You always make reference to the team. So tell us a little bit about the team, and how did those people get attracted to you and to your purpose?
I would actually not believe that, it was either me or definitely the young adults that we work with, right? Have been instrumental in bringing this absolutely fantastic team together. Like I said, Deepa, I think one of the few things that I'm completely grateful for, or one of the many things that I'm completely grateful for, has just been the many, many fantastic people who I've met through my life, right? And who've really made my life so much more richer and easier. So when I was going to, when I started off on Antarang, there were a couple of friends who were at a life stage when they believed that it was time for them to, make a shift in their own lives and make a shift in enriching themselves by enriching someone else's life. Because when you make that change, and when you sort of catalyze change, what happens to you is so much more powerful.
Yes.
Actually, right? You derive so much satisfaction, and you grow as an individual. So in
Correct.
a lot of ways, doing development work is selfish work, because you're constantly looking for that adrenaline, and that almost like it becomes like an aphrodisiac, where when you do something, you're seeing change on the ground, you're seeing life for somebody else, or and therefore your life gets better, then you want to do more and more, right? There were close friends of mine whose children had flown the nest. They had the time. They dedicated their lives to their kids, and they said, "Okay, how can we be part of the mission?" And they, couple of my friends actually, Jessie Phillips is probably one of the most amazing mothers. I've learned a lot as on being a parent from her, right?
Okay.
So she joined right at the beginning. Another good friend, Deepa, whose daughter and my daughter were in school together. We'd meet at PTA meetings, at Bombay Scottish School, and I'd ask her, "You're still in investment banking, really? Aren't you bored? Aren't you bored of the monotony? Why don't you come and check it out?" So she joined in as well. And without all of these people, there's this amazing young woman called Susan D'Souza, who's also, interestingly, a researcher now. She was a researcher even then. Now she's a researcher in Bangalore. She was our first employee. I remember. I don't know whether I felt like it was my interview, because we used to work out of CCD in Parel. That was an office, and the young men and women there they would give us a table, and we'd probably order 2 coffees in the entire day, and they'd let us sit the entire day and work. So she came for the interview when we decided we needed to, hire someone who understood psychology, understood young people, and she had done a lot of, psychological research around youth psychology especially. So, and when she said yes and to joining us, we celebrated. I don't think she realized that it wasn't her job interview, but we felt that we had passed the interview.
Swayamvar had happened.
Absolutely, absolutely. To this day, one of the conscious things that we've done as an organization is to keep the average age of the organization young. So the average age of the team members at Antarang is 26. And you can imagine, if average is 26 and there are people like me who are pushing up the average, right, how young the team is. And it's been it's truly every single day I look forward to meeting everyone, and the energy that I derive from being around so many young people is just simply phenomenal. And the team makes the organization at the end of the day.
You spoke about impact, and impact means working with government, working with the government machinery, as you rightly said, and of course to have the processes, so lay the pipes, so to say. So tell us a little bit about that. What are how is Antarang structured, and how do you then engage with governments in the area of education and livelihoods?
Sure. So Antarang bridges that gap between education to productive careers of choice. Right. Our vision is to ensure that every young adult in the country is productively, which means that she or he has to earn well, passionately, is doing something that they are absolutely passionate about, and positively. And I'll come to that a little bit, why that word is there in the vision statement. Engaged in a career of her or his choice.
Beautiful.
We wanted to bring in the concept of careers right down the pyramid as well. The big question that we sort of asked ourselves was, why is today choice and careers the privilege of a very few?
Wow.
Right? It needs to become the prerogative of every young person in the country.
See, even the word I used was wrong. I used the word livelihoods. You said careers. So thank you.
Absolutely. So it's not about them eking out a living, but making a career and feeling powerful about being able to move up socially and economically. All of us, at the end of the day, we work so that we're able to move up socially, right? We're able to get access to those social structures that otherwise our socio-economic status would not allow us to, and economically, right? Like both need to go hand in hand. It's not just about earning more, but also feel that socially I'm able to access more networks, more services, because that ultimately is growth. So this was something that was always, front and center of what we did. And if we needed to make careers part of everybody's mindset, right, and make sure that career development is something that was understood by every single child and every single young adult in the country, we needed to make sure that it became part of your education, mainstream education curriculum. Anything that's not mainstream always remains on the side, right? Anything is not measured and reported by the mainstream remains on the side. So that was something that was really clear to us. So this also meant that there were some kids who were not in the mainstream. So you needed a preventive element, which is to make sure that children from high school onwards started thinking about careers, thinking in terms of आगे मुझे जाके क्या बनना है, कैसे करूंगी, और मैं आगे उसमें कैसे बढ़ूंगी, राइट? पढ़ाई के बाद क्या होगा, कितना पढ़ाई अच्छा है, कैसा पढ़ाई अच्छा है. These were questions that we needed to help kids and their parents answer while they were still in high school, right? And then there's a curative element for our work, which is the bridge today, where we actually run an employability skills training program. So there's career guidance and counseling from the 8th to the 10th standard, 11th standard to the end of, when young adults are about 25, we run the curative element where we do a very basic employability skills training and then connect them to job opportunities, mentorship, and continued career development avenues. So it's a fairly long haul that we do from 13 currently till about 25 to 28. Right? So this 13 to the 8th to 10th standard program is run as a career week within school systems. So it's there in the school timetables. The career week is today there in school timetables in Mumbai, Pune, and Udaipur. These are the 3 cities. We run through the government schools exclusively currently. So we are there in all MCGM schools, NMMC schools, TMC schools, Pimpri Chinchwad Municipal Corporation schools, Pune Municipal Corporation schools, and through the district education office in Udaipur. So it's part of the curriculum, right? Sure, we put it into the curriculum. Now career guidance and counseling is available to all children in these government schools through school hours. It's not after school, it's during school hours.
That's big.
But who'll do it? That was the second piece. We don't, we know that when we are sick, we need to go to a doctor. But when we need career advice, where are those career counselors? We don't have a cadre in the country. They don't exist. So that was a piece that we then put in place. We've actually trained out more than 350 career counselors so far through an intensive training program. We call them career facilitators. We can't call them counselors because counseling certification is something we don't officially as yet have. We're working towards it. We call them career facilitators. And we've got an intensive training program for them as well, right? So they are now placed within the school system. They're available to all of these kids through the school system. And that's what happens. And the same career facilitators are then trained to also provide employability skills, right? Train young people in employability skills. And then we've connected with more than about 350 industry players for the placements. Because through this, kids make a career choice through a methodology that we've developed. They actually make their own career pathways through a combination of understanding their interests, their aptitude, their realities and personalities, right? These are well accepted psychometric testing that's already available. And we've done an algorithm that sort of does that matching for them. We have a technology backend that does that. And then individual career counseling reports are generated. Our counselors go ahead and do individual coaching and then put them on that career path. So that's the entire process. We've embedded it into the systems in both schools as well as junior colleges and senior colleges as well.
So this takes into account both the child's capabilities, and it also takes into account, what is the kind of support that's available to the child within the home and within society, and also what is the child's aspirations, right? I think it's all these three.
Absolutely. And that aspiration is our first beacon. We first ask them, so what do you see yourself doing? What's your aspiration? What do you want to become? Right? And it doesn't stop there. Why do you want to become that? What about it moves you? So that they're able to really unpack that it's not the glamour of, so in Bombay, for example, if you ask any young kid what do you want to do, most often than not they'd say banker, because banking and stock market has been painted to be this money making glamorous profession, right? And where you dress up in a nice suit and you sit in a car, you're sitting in an air conditioned office in front of a computer. That's the way they look at banking. And then we help them unpack all of that and say that why that, because you want to live in a nice house, right? You want a proper house, you don't want to live in the slums, you want to be able to drive a car, you want that sense of agency where you feel your finances are well taken care of. So let's see what you're good at and match those two together, and that's how they arrive at their career pathways.
I would never have imagined banking is what you'll say, huh, Priya? Really?
So many of them, and that's why BCom, 60% of the kids who manage to clear 12th standard end up taking BCom.
Because they want to work in a bank and they think bank means a loan and I can work, get a nice house and I can work in a nice office.
Yes, absolutely. And I'll make a lot of money in the stock market. So it's
Oh,
connections, and that's the power of media, I guess, right? And what we project.
also the work starts with these children in class 8. Do
Yes.
you also influence parents in any way, Priya?
Absolutely, Deepa. Without parents being part of the journey, right? All of this remains an aspiration. It doesn't convert into reality. So the amount of effort that we put in with children, we also put in, I won't as yet say equal, but we're working towards that, the same amount of effort with the parents as well. So parent counseling and making parents part of the journey, right, is there right from the beginning. I won't call it parent counseling, but really tapping into the wisdom that parents bring to their children's lives, right? The one thing that we firmly believe in is that every parent knows intuitively what will work and what they want for their children, right? How do you enable them to articulate it and put it to practice, right? How do you sort of give them the resources so that they can expand their own sense of possibility, and that automatically impacts the children as well. If parents' aspiration and their horizon is broadened, automatically they support broadening children's horizons as well, right? And the other important thing is a very real fear that a lot of parents have, that they articulate very, very differently. Because the minute, and it's true for all of us as parents, right? The minute you enable your child, you empower your child with the ability to make decisions, they may end up taking decisions that are not palatable to you. How do you deal with that? How do we deal with that as parents, right? And that's a very real fear. So for example, if my daughter is empowered enough to go out and work and she's financially independent, right? What if she makes a choice about her life partner that will bring me badnami in society? How will I deal with that? Right? These are very real fears for parents. They need an outlet to discuss it. They need other parents to discuss it with, and they need someone to help them break down those components and talk about it, and then those fears get dissipated, right?
So in this journey, you've also been awarded. So tell us a little bit about why do you think in the social sector awards and recognition are important for nonprofits, and how do they in fact spur impact?
That's a great question, and it took me a long time to become comfortable with it, and I'm still not sure if I'm completely comfortable with it, right? Because very often it's only the founder who gets awarded. So the Ashoka Fellowship is being an Ashoka Fellow is a very big deal in the development sector, because one, you can't apply for it, right? You need to be found and nominated, and then elected, and it's a very intensive 1.5 to 2 year process where You are put under the microscope as a person, as an individual. Your work is put under a microscope. A lot of your own biases come to the fore. It's an uncomfortable process. And at the end of the day, I will not be able to do even 1/100th of what Antarang does by myself. It's the team that makes it. More often than not, there are days when I don't do real work, right? I'm just meeting people a lot of times, or I'm just talking to people. But the real work is done by the fantastic team on the ground, and they don't get to be in the limelight as often as probably I do or some of my board members do. So it took me a long time to get used to that idea, and I can't say that I'm still very comfortable. But what happens is the credibility that comes with it, because a lot of these awards, whether it's the recent Aspire Fellowship that I'm a part of, it's been floated by societal platforms that has been started by a few people like Nandan Nilakani and Rohini Nilakani and others, where they look at ideas that have the ability to have exponential scale and change mindsets, right? So these are fellowships then that bring the organization model a lot of credibility. Once that is established, because a lot of us are grant funded, that we are funded by philanthropic capital, that credibility is really essential. Why would anyone write a check if they're not convinced about the credibility of the model, the working, the impact of the model, right, the efficiency and effectiveness of the organization? So these, whether it's the Guide Star transparency badges that we get, or Give India registration, or Credibility Alliance certification, or the fellowship, the Ashoka, being an Ashoka Fellow or an Aspire Fellow, that's how it helps a lot.
Yeah. No, and I really think this is very important for people who are watching us today and those who will watch tomorrow, because these are all the aspects that build trust. And I think we know that we are a large country, and there's a lot that individuals and organizations, we also have a responsibility for positive social change. In this tranche, the last 9 minutes of our conversation, I'd really like you to focus on your call for action. What is it that you would like people to take away from, the work, your life work, and what you've learned looking closely at the lives of these young people who are, I would say, make up the chunk of our society?
So yeah, absolutely, Deepa. We are the youngest nation in the world, right? Often 50% of our population is actually in the youth age group. That's a lot of, that's, close to 250 million young people. So we owe it to them, and out of that, close to 50% are living in poverty or on at the brink of poverty, right? So you're talking about 150 million young people who are poor, and as a nation, if we are not able to help them break that, and poverty is intergenerational. I'm poor, my children remain poor, their children remain poor. I'm poor because my parents were poor, right? Poverty, unfortunately, is very, very intergenerational, right? So I feel it's our duty to make sure that we enable these 150 million kids that who are living in poverty or at the fringes of poverty, to break that intergenerational cycle. And how can we do that? It is not by giving them an incrementally better livelihood. It is not by making sure that they earn minimum wages so that they survive. That's not going to help them break that cycle, right? If each one of us makes sure that we are part of this cycle that helps them skip and leap levels, right, and get into careers of their own choice, let them one, open their minds and hearts to careers that are out there. As an individual, can I do it? Absolutely. If each one of us mentors 2 or 3 young people and just opens their minds, every week you tell them, okay, this week let's learn about banking, this week let's learn about research, this week let's learn about advertising, this week let's learn about manufacturing, right? Simple things like that. You send them resources and open their minds and hearts to the possibility out there. And then help them plot a journey for themselves, right? On step by step, how do I get there? I have an aspiration, how do I get there? And thereby, if you're able to get them into jobs and careers that will help them break the cycle of poverty, I think we've absolutely done our job. And the beauty of this work is that individually, each one of us, even if we spend just an hour a week, as little as an hour a week, right, we can impact a minimum of 2 to 3 families,
Absolutely.
right? And that means that you're just by doing that and getting 2 kids into a career of their choice, at the minimum, at the very minimum, you're adding 3 to 4 lakhs to family incomes, which is you're doubling family income, sometimes tripling family incomes. How huge is that satisfaction, right? When a young adult starts working, no, Deepa, what happens is that immediately you see ripple effects. The siblings stay on in school, they don't drop out, right? If their mother is sick, they access healthcare immediately and not wait for it to become so bad that it needs hospitalization. There is 2 meals, nutritious meals on the table. Tangible, so tangible. No? It's like it's always amazing because one young adult that you've changed, they change at least 10 people in their peer circle. So that ripple effect is pretty amazing there. Um, yeah, so I would just say sign up as a mentor. If you have the time and the willingness to commit a little bit more, say 3 hours a day, sign up as a career facilitator, right? And these things, it's a huge ecosystem that's waiting for you out there. And if you're willing to really contribute a little bit more and make this your career, and I have to admit that you will never be able to earn monetarily as much as you do in the corporate sector because our salaries are not as large, and that's an unfortunate thing, I would say, because you need more and more bright young minds in the development sector because the problems that we're solving are actually the most intractable, wicked problems that we're solving, right? If we don't make it feasible for people to make a career in the development sector, these problems are not going to be solved. But unfortunately, we're not yet there. But if you're willing to, sort of commit your life to the development sector, it is the most amazing journey with the most amazing growth trajectory that you will ever have.
That's so powerful, and that's really something that I'm sure a lot of young people are going to take note of what you've said. What I see, Priya, is that role models make a very big impact. It's almost like, do you have a hall of fame at Akanksha, and how do you perpetuate this cycle of hope and positivity?
Sure. Yeah. At Antarang, we most definitely have, several role models. In fact, maybe I'll talk about a few who are, who to me, to this date are my role models as well, right? And I'll talk about this young boy called Vijay Naidu. You'll see his story. I often talk about him, and I feel he reinforced brought back one of my own core values back to me that I had lost a little bit during this COVID crisis. Right, the COVID crisis has been very, very harsh on people at the bottom of the pyramid. A lot of us, we actually know anecdotally of many people who haven't paid, say, their help or their drivers, or even the newspaper wala because they could not deliver or they could not provide their services during the lockdown, right? And there are millions of them like that whose only source of income went away, right? Vijay's parents was also, his father unfortunately lost his source of income during that. Vijay is a master's in zoology, right? And his passion was to work in research, in medical research, in health research. Very passionate about it. Bright young boy from one of the slums in Mumbai. Went through a BSc in SIS college, did his MSc as well, right? And he completed his MSc during the COVID crisis. Wasn't able to find a job, really needed money. And I said, listen, Vijay, if only Amazon is hiring, work there, it doesn't matter. He wasn't willing to let go. I got really upset. But he told me a very simple thing. You made me believe in my aspiration and my dreams. Give that same Amazon job maybe to my father, but I want to stay on and find my dream job. Right? It was a wake up call to me. I have to say that he makes us very proud because he waited and continued to apply, and we made sure that his applications became more and more powerful. Today he works with, with the Piramal group in medical research. He's a research assistant in a fantastic lab in Chandigarh. So there are so many of them, and his life has completely changed. Right, he lives in a beautiful apartment there. So yeah.
Amazing, amazing. You said there are 3 centers. We're in the last minute. So I would like, there are lots of questions. People, I'm sure, are thinking that they probably have a feeling that they don't know what's hit them. But I'd like you all to go and visit the Antarang Foundation website. And in the meanwhile, I think we should close by listening to the Antarang Foundation anthem that I love so much. Can we do that?
Oh, lovely. Thank you.
Thank you. It was just so much.
सही गलत कुछ पता नहीं था, ना सीखा मैं डिसीजंस लेना, किसी चक्कर में फंसते रहता था, भटका सा, खोया खोया सा, मुश्किलों से निकाला खुद को, मिल गई मुझे मंजिल का पता। आजादी अंतरंग में, सीखा उड़ना आसमानों में, आजादी अंतरंग में, सीखा उड़ना आसमानों में, ना रुकना है ना झुकना है, आगे आगे बढ़ते जाना है, ना रुकना है ना झुकना है, आगे आगे बढ़ते जाना है। किसी को डॉक्टर है बनना, किसी को बनना साइंटिस्ट, और कोई बनना चाहता है एक्टर या डायरेक्टर, कोई आसमां में पायलट तो और कोई ब्यूटिशियन। ये सपना है अपना सपना है, सपना है अपना सपना है, सपना है अपना सपना है, सपना है अपना सपना है। आजादी अंतरंग में, सीखा उड़ना आसमानों में, आजादी अंतरंग में, सीखा उड़ना आसमानों में, ना रुकना है ना झुकना है, आगे आगे बढ़ते जाना है, ना रुकना है ना झुकना है, आगे आगे बढ़ते जाना है।
Priya, that was such a beautiful anthem, and I really have loved talking to you. And I'm sure this is something that's going to make a lot of people think. I hope this video gets looked at, shared widely, and those people who haven't heard of Antarang or what work is being done by Priya and her team, if you've learned about this the first time, I think just dig a little deeper. And like Priya says beautifully, the Antarang is the inner journey. And I'm sure it sets us all off on an inner journey that truly takes us to our freedom, where we can move out of that limited mindset of what can I do, or being trapped into our own little boxes, to come out and to really do something. Like we said, it could be just two people, and look at the cascade and the ripple effect that we can start off.
Thank you, Deepa. Thank you for having me.
Thank you very much, and wish you and your team all the very best. More power to you, Priya, and may you keep on dazzling and inspiring us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Thanks
you
for
very
having me.
much. Bye bye. Thank you, Anuja.